So I don't think anyone could really argue that actually doctors are working harder and harder. And it just feels that the money, wherever you're working, is just not going as far. And so you think to yourself, is there a better way? Now, everyone sort of looks towards private care and sort of private practice, and just some people are genuinely curious but haven't got a clue where to start. I invited Dr Matthew Wickham, who is a private GP, to talk through and really to give you a good 5-step process to get you through your initial stages of private practice. So go on, talk me through what your working week looks like and make everyone jealous.
So at the minute, clinically, I work no more than 16 hours a week in my private clinic.
Okay.
I do the odd out-of-hours NHS session on top of that, which might be a 4 or 6 hour session, but nothing too taxing. But yes, privately, I work about 16 hours a week, and I've been doing that properly now for the last 4 months, and I've nearly replaced all of the income that I would have said a six-figure salary, GP should be on.
Thought about sort of a 5-step approach. So should we talk through that? So what's step 1? Where do we start with if we want to step into this world of private practice?
The first step is to plan it. Like any good project or anything that you want to do that's a significant change in your life or what you're doing for work, I think planning things is probably a really solid step to start with. And thinking back to when I started out, I basically was a GP registrar. Mm-hmm. And I was planning how to do this. I realised that I was quite entrepreneurial from doing other business things beforehand, and I wanted to basically set up something privately. When I qualified with my CCT, I qualified in the August. I had my 1 session a week private clinic up and running. I think I saw 1 patient in my first month. It wasn't anything fancy, but I had it up and running within a month.
Gotcha.
So from August to September. By the end of September, I had a patient paying me privately.
So you're sort of like being realistic that you weren't having a massive clinic that was bursting at the seams full of patients. You had a private clinic with 1 patient booked in, but you had actually planned it and got started, which I think is probably a key point as well. So you chose, and so sort of leading on to sort of point 2 in terms of what your clinics look like, sort of you've chosen it in person. I know there's the rise of a lot of online consultations and models. Sort of like, where do you go with that? Sort of.
I think it depends on what you've planned to do. So okay. I deliberately planned to do an in-person clinic because I could provide services. So I saw that there was a need for simple things like earwax removal and tongue tie release, right, in the area I work in Glasgow. So it was quite straightforward to be able to say, well, actually, those are clearly things I'm only have to do in person. So I had to plan my 1 session a week around that plan. But obviously, if you're thinking of setting up an online consulting service, then that has advantages in the sense that you don't have to find a room and all that kind of stuff. But it does give you a certain amount of freedom and flexibility around your current role. And I think that's the nice thing about starting a clinic in a sort of lifestyle business kind of way. Is that really you're not jumping off 2 feet in and going, I'm about to take over the world with my giant corporation. You're really just kind of going, actually, I just want to make my life a bit more straightforward. And I want to have a bit more control over the patients I see and how long I see them for. We haven't even talked about the fact I have half-an-hour appointments.
Just wash the green out from my face.
It's a good job you sat down.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the reality is that you can kind of taper down. So as your private practice slowly starts to pick up, you can taper down on the NHS work. So I started doing 1 session a week. Yeah. Maybe some months I maybe even did 2 sessions a month. I didn't have a lot of patients because I was still establishing brand, establishing the clinic and getting my name out there so people could find me. Within 12, 13 months, I was doing 2 sessions a week, up to 2 days a week. And then now I do effectively 4 days. I offer some appointments on each of those 4 days, Monday to Thursday. But I don't total a huge amount of clinical time out of that, which is great because it gives me all of the flexibility we were talking about.
Gotcha. So I think that's quite an interesting clarification. And we'll put that as point 3 in terms of like how you've scaled this. So you've really started quite small. So you were working quite small. You were doing one clinic with not very many patients booked in, but it was a start. You were still working in the NHS at that time as well. And then as your private practice has increased and, you've sussed out what you're doing, you've managed to scale that up to, and when you say lifestyle, it's not so much lifestyle medicine, but actually the lifestyle as in leading the life that you want to lead rather than being dictated to by, not just the NHS, but any employer, to work around what works for you. So you got from that way. So we've not sort of really touched upon, I think it's a point that everyone worries about in terms of regulation. So I know you sort of think about, I panic about CQC and when they're going to come around and report. Obviously, you've got HIS up in Scotland, I believe. Yep. So is that an easy process, hard process? Sort of what's the deal behind that?
It's a process. Okay. And I think in my head, I kind of view it along the same way as I know you're a trainer. So, when you have to tick all the boxes as a trainee to get through all the bits and to get signed off at the end. The kind of same principle, really. It's just the next set of boxes to tick. It's getting through all of the regulatory hurdles. And there are ways that you can look at that. You can look at it as I must solve this problem exercise. I must do it myself. Or you can, in most things, you can outsource it. So from a business point of view, it's actually pretty reasonable to outsource this.
Did you outsource it? Sorry, or
I'll give you the best example I can give of what filling in a CQC form is like. Because I didn't fill in a CQC form because I live in Scotland.
Yep.
Filling in a mortgage application is the best example I can give. If anybody who's ever had to fill one in knows that you pay the broker to do it.
Yes, I've just moved. Absolutely, yes.
They either did it themselves and fell foul, or vowed never to do it again themselves, or you pay a broker a few £100 and they just go and do it, and it gets done, and it's stress free. You still have to provide all the documents. You still have to provide, pretty much everything except your blood type, I think now. But the reality is the same for the CQC or the HIS registration or the Welsh or the Northern Irish regulating bodies. They all want you to give a certain amount of information in a specific way, and it has to be specific for what you're doing, and it has to be almost anally written to the point where if it's not, they can actually delay your process and your application.
Gotcha.
So the simple answer is get someone to help you do it, because you'll get it done, and you'll see that time investment back, because you haven't literally pulled your hair out and gone grey over the fact that you can't fill in a form, and why are they asking for everything you've ever done since you were 16 years old? I mean, they literally ask all this, right? So that's the, if you have to go down the CQC registration, HIS registration, please get somebody to help you. If you've never done it before, you will not regret doing it. And there's people on the DocSport website that we can recommend if they're interested in looking at that.
And we'll leave all the links below for the DocSport website. There, I've seen some of the CQC webinars that you did, and they were so knowledgeable. Some of the bits that they came out with. So okay, that's a brilliant point to make. So yes, you do need CQC, HIS, or potentially need it. Get help. Love it. So
I circumvented
go on,
it.
Go on then.
I did say I literally qualified as a CCT in the August, and I opened my clinic in the September, and clearly that's not a very long time. And if anybody who is interested in looking at these things from a regulatory point of view, it's going to take at least 6 to 9 months.
Okay.
So I have a private clinic, but I use practicing privileges,
right,
as a way of not getting round, but as a way of streamlining the ability to start. So it meant that I basically am working under somebody else's regulatory approval. So although I'm working independently, and yes, I have full control of what I do, technically I am still working underneath somebody else's regulatory approval. The difference is I know the person, and it's just me and him.
Okay, makes sense.
And actually, if anything, I bolster up his approval, because if he has any complaints, they can come to me, and vice versa. So it's actually been quite a helpful thing. But the reality is that if you have practicing privileges, you can work in the capacity that you work in the NHS as a private provider.
Understood. So that's a useful way, just to, as you say, a little bit of, if you can find somewhere that, but that's only, I take it then, if you're doing in person rather than online, that you need a place that you can physically work out of that you can excise your practicing privileges. Okay, so I take
the caveat with that is then, sorry, the caveat with that is that if you want to set up an online business doing private consulting, you must be regulated.
Right. I think that's a really good tip, because I see, I think everyone thinks, well, surely I can just set up a headphone mic, send a Teams link, and then you're done. Whereas actually there's a lot more complexity towards it, which is quite right from that way. So you've talked about, obviously, I know in a slightly different fashion about websites, but that sort of clearly there must be a marketing element to this for you to grow. So sort of what does that look like?
Honestly, you need a website.
Okay.
That's the reality. The one thing that we never had to learn in medical school in the UK is how to do marketing and sales, because the NHS is free at point of use, as we all love.
Yep.
But that means that as doctors, we never actually had to bother learning how to do any marketing or sales. But things like YouTube and things like LinkedIn, but more importantly, having a website. And it doesn't have to be a fancy website. It just has to be something that is easily findable, so that when someone searches, as most patients do in Google, they can find you. If they can find you, then it's up to you to what you write on the webpage to get them to book their appointment with you. But if they can't find you, it doesn't matter how good your website is. So getting a good website, getting somebody who knows how to make it findable by Google.
Yep.
Or any other search engine, should probably say that. Then unless it can be found, you'll never actually get anywhere near the amount of patients that you're looking for. And to be absolutely honest, you're not opening up all the time, right? If you're only doing one session, starting one session a week, it's not like you've got your front door open for people to walk by. So you're not getting walk-ins. You are literally just trying to find people to book. You're an appointment booking service. So I want to know that they're coming on a Tuesday afternoon at 3:00, because that's when I'm going to be there.
And it sounds like with the website, even going down to like your logos, everything, that you're giving me the impression that you outsourced all of that as well. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So if you're a person that particularly creative on Canva, and I know you can be, other things, anybody who's a particularly creative person could probably go and create their own logo, but I didn't have the time or the ability to do that or learn how to do that. So I did pay somebody to do it, but you can find people to make you a logo. And once you've got a logo, you've got some colors, you can brand it, you can then make your website on the back end of that. And it's not as expensive or as difficult as you might think. Talking, £400 or £500 to get a basic logo and a website hosted for a year and created. So again, at the start, you're not going to be offering 20,000 procedures or different things. You're literally going to be starting with maybe a core set of products, whatever they may be, but you're going to have them probably within 2 or 3 pages on a website. So you're not setting up to start big. And one of the things that I really did like was that I knew how to set up a website. You can build it yourself, Wix and Squarespace, these kind of places. I mean, there are other ones now that are AI driven, and you can quite literally just talk. You don't have to know anything about websites. You can just chat to it and it will build it. But you've got to know how to chat to it, right?
Absolutely.
The thing is that once you've played around with them a bit, you get better at knowing how they work. And then, so because I kind of had an interest in fiddling around with it, I could optimize it as I went along. And then I got to a point where I was like, I actually need someone professionally to do this.
Which makes
should have done that start.
Well, and I think that's where, sort of going full circle, that's why you said, you've learned a lot on your, on your journey from CCT to now sort of getting the life that you want to lead in terms of being there as a father for your young family, which is completely commendable from that way. We've talked through then, you've written it all down. I'll leave a link to the actual book itself, I've had a look at it because, prior to this interview, and it's phenomenal. It's just very clearly laid out. And I think actually someone who's a bit logical, so most doctors, it's a very clear tick list of what to look at, where to look, and sort of will talk you through step by step. We sort of briefly skimmed over those 5 points of plan and strategy, whether you're going to be online, in person, what does scaling look like? Do you need to be regulated? And then finally, sort of the key point of marketing to help drive a lot of that. But then, I just got to say thank you again, Matthew, for your time. So sort of just giving hopefully a little bit of a nugget and hopefully cleared up a couple of those questions that you fellow doctors out there might have, and go and check out all the links.
Thanks very much, Dave.